tonight.
We enlisted as people who needed work, and then we came out as really true patriots.
They've given everything for their country.
This man who was full of life, he had the best smile and the bluest eyes.
But when they come home,
2012, the year that he died, we lost one active duty member a day to suicide.
they lose hope.
It kind of breaks your heart when things like this happen to the good people.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Different things work for different people.
For the next half hour, WOWT 6 News presents Brian Mastre Reports, Surviving the War, Losing the Battle at Home.
Good evening, I'm Brian Mastre, coming to you from Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia. Here we are surrounded by heroes. This is the final resting place for more than 400,000 veterans and their families. When you talk to a military family who's lost a loved one, we often hear that they want to be remembered for how they lived, not how they died. But that's harder to grasp when that someone has ended their own life. One can't help but be moved by the serenity of Arlington National Cemetery. Rows and rows of immense sacrifice and honor. Every one of these markers tells only part of the story. A name, rank, military branch, where they served, when they were born and when they died. A little math makes us realize how many of them died far too young.
We went on the same tour and everything.
For the first time since they came back from Iraq 8 years ago, this team is together again. In September of 2007, no one envisioned a cemetery in Virginia would be their reunion destination. After all, they all came home from the war alive.
I'm Casey.
I'm Jenna. Nice to meet you. Pleasure.
The soldiers came to Arlington National Cemetery to meet the family of one of their leaders in Iraq and to finally say goodbye. Specialist Jesse Tolbert of West Virginia. The columbarium at Arlington holds his cremated remains, section S25.
I knew him pretty much almost since after basic training on into our military experience, like we were friends.
Travis Johnson traveled from Lakeland, Florida to be here.
He would come at the drop of a hat if you needed to and just bail you out of whatever you were in.
Tolbert was a special soldier. He was always very willing to do whatever you ask him. And sometimes as a leader, that's hard to find. Somebody that's so energetic about what they do. And he really, really loved the military.
He would have walked to see us.
It almost didn't happen. A few months earlier, Kyle Hansen of Omaha, another one of Jesse Tolbert's friends and fellow soldiers, along with Jenna Vaughn of Lincoln, another member of the team, tried to find Jesse Tolbert online to warn him of bad news. The death of one of their friends from a brain aneurysm.
None of the phone numbers I had worked anymore, and so I got on the internet to try and find him. But instead of his phone number, I found his obituary. Jesse
Tolbert had killed himself in 2012. It's the first anyone from his team in Iraq had heard about it.
Sadly, some think that there's no options left. So when those options have run out, where do I go from here? And no amount of friends or family will be there for you if you don't let them.
Jenna and Kyle decided they had to get the unit back together to pay respects to Jesse Tolbert, to say goodbye, and learn what they could to keep others from doing the same thing.
You hear stories of guys from Vietnam and the Second World War that don't see each other for 30, 40 years. And in the formative younger years of our life, we were basically all we had.
Jesse Tolbert's team knew he suffered a traumatic brain injury from a bomb in Iraq. When their deployment ended in 2007, they grew apart. Jesse went back home to West Virginia. The rest of the team scattered across the country from Florida to Texas and Nebraska.
And y'all come a long way to have this, for him, and I think it's very sweet of all of you. And I swear, I can tell that y'all really loved each other.
Jesse would sometimes stay with his aunt and uncle in Maryland.
It's not a side of him he really wanted to show to a lot of people when he got back. He didn't want us to hear stories of over there.
Jesse Tolbert struggled with post-traumatic stress. The team knew that.
It's not like your broken arm. It's much more abstract, and I think what makes it different for military members is that a lot of the things that trigger your PTSD or what it relates to are subjects that people oftentimes don't have context for, And so it's even harder to talk about that.
PTSD is in many forms. And I think one of the key things, and I think, kind of touched on this earlier, is that sometimes as a leader, the people that you think that's the strongest are the ones that are suffering the most, and you can't pick up on it until it's later. Sometimes it hits them months and years later.
The soldiers who protected the base in Iraq as part of the 259th Field Service Company felt like they couldn't protect one of their own.
It's hard not to take that burden, but it's not a burden that we need to be taking. So there's nothing rationally we can do about it. It's hard, and it makes me feel sad for, I lost a friend, but there's absolutely nothing I can do to bring that past back and change those things.
Coming up,
It's not just a military issue, it's an American issue.
experts weigh in on effective treatments.
Taking that first step is the hardest.
And are there warning signs, ways for the rest of us to help?
Sometimes you wouldn't sleep all night long.
When Brian Mastre reports Surviving the War, Losing the Battle at Home continues.
I grew up around horses.
Rebecca Morrison started showing horses in Texas when she was 3.
There was like a period of about a month where I didn't have a horse. That was the worst time. Yeah, and so they're pretty much connected to my happiness. Oh, easy. Easy, Bubba.
For her,
You look pretty good. Yeah, you look good.
this farm in rural Maryland gives comfort.
People who have dogs live longer, and it translates to horses, but it's a little bit different. A dog, unless you do something terrible to it, is pretty much always going to come to you. You're their pack leader. A horse is a prey animal, and so their natural instinct with human is to be afraid of them. And so once you can actually build a trust relationship with a horse, and you come out and they run to see you, or they want to be near you, it's just so powerful, because you know that someone accepts you, doesn't judge you, and listens in their own way. And they're so big.
Rebecca Morrison believes so strongly in the mental health benefits of horses for veterans and their loved ones. She follows the EGALA method.
My personal story, I've had horses my entire life.
She brought together a number of experts in their fields to demonstrate the power of equine therapy.
I was married to a soldier for about 4 years, and tragically lost him to suicide after deployment and some struggles coming home and reintegrating, and found a lot of solace and a lot of care, and really found myself again through my horse.
Her husband, Captain Ian Morrison, flew Apache helicopters.
And I know when people die, sometimes they make him into a deity, but he really was the kindest person I've ever met. He took such good care of me, of his friends, of his soldiers, of his family. I'm pretty hot-headed, and he was like the yin to my yang, very calm, and took his time with everything. We called him Eeyore because he was so thoughtful and slow, and everything was very steady. He actually really enjoyed being around the horses. He was a natural rider, which is made me sick, because I've worked my whole life to be a good rider. He loved working out, being outdoors, playing with the dogs.
In 2012, a couple months after coming home from Iraq, Ian Morrison couldn't sleep.
Looking back, I can see that he had lots of interest in things, and that he didn't want to work out, which was his favorite thing to do, and he didn't have an appetite, and he ate like a horse. So on the look back, there are things, that I would caution others to look for. But with him, he wasn't mean, he wasn't hostile, he wasn't, angry, the things that you hear about. So it just sort of came in about 2 weeks, like a thief in the night.
The grief overwhelmed her.
Gracias.
Horses helped, but Rebecca Morrison struggled with the fact that she was a counselor, trained to see light through the darkness.
I had a lot of guilt, because I thought, I'm a counselor and my husband just killed himself, that doesn't even compute, But I think through a lot of good therapy, a lot of immediate quality therapy that I got, I was able to see that I actually did everything that I could have done. He tried to get help 6 different times in the week of his death, and I was right there with him. The truth of it is you can't actually save a person. Like, one person can't do that on their own. There has to be a community of people to help, and that's why I love all this stuff, because it brings people in, to help you, to support you. But one little wife can't fight the world on her own. It's a lot, and when it's right there in your face, it's really hard to see the gravity of it, I guess, how bad it could possibly be.
Rebecca Morrison didn't run from her recovery. She headed straight towards it. She moved to the Washington, D.C. area to volunteer with TAPS, Tragedy Assistance for Survivors, a place she turned to in the early days of her husband's suicide.
My closest friends and family were very worried. I moved from Texas up here to work for TAPS, but it was something I needed to do. I needed to face it, and I needed to try to make a difference. And like you said, I was really prepared to do it. It's like God put me in that place. I was in school. I'm good at public speaking. Now I have the personal experience, and I'm not really afraid of anything. So go do it. Go out and take it on. I had pressed on that nerve enough that it didn't hurt me anymore.
Every day at the ranch, a reminder of her husband, Ian, is always nearby. He's a good listener.
I always think about him, that big red horse he gave to me, So, everything I do, he's in it. He was little bitty and a baby. And now he's a monster. He thinks he's a person. Ike.
Ike?
Yeah, he named him General Eisenhower.
Coming up,
Reaching out is the hardest thing.
how other veterans make connections to save lives.
Everyone who gets involved sort of knows. They sort of know subjectively or qualitatively that, man, there's something really powerful here.
When WOWT 6 News, Surviving the War, Losing the Battle at Home, continues.
Today marks an historic event for the veteran community. Clay Hunt was an amazing young man.
In February, Jake Wood described his friend and fellow Marine, Clay Hunt, in a ceremony at the White House. Hunt killed himself in 2011. He was 28. His family said he struggled to find adequate mental health treatment. The Clay Hunt Suicide Prevention for American Veterans Act is designed to make it easier for vets to find care by adding more psychiatrists and expanding programs that are working.
Every service member has different limits.
Iowa Senator Joni Ernst, the first female veteran to serve in the U.S. Senate, told me the invisible wounds of war cannot go unnoticed.
It is not a sign of weakness. If anything, it takes a very courageous person to step forward and say, you know what, I think I need a little extra help in this area. I just need to talk to somebody.
Rebecca Morrison's husband, Ian, tried to get help 6 times. She believes his death was as much related to his military service as any other.
It's not an easy world to live in, and then you add in the stress of a military life, not even factoring in a deployment, because actually most people who died by suicide have not been deployed, which is what we previously thought that it was all. Combat. Suicide in the military historically has been about the same as suicide in America. So it's not just a military issue, it's an American issue.
The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention reports 40,000 Americans die by suicide every year. Veterans account for 22% of them.
Sometimes when you're gone, it's like life continues to happen, and when you come back, you realize that life has happened, and you've been gone for a year, you've missed it. So it's like, how do I fit back in? I mean, it's every time you're gone for a few months, that's what happens. You have to figure out, how do I reconnect? And that's hard.
I've seen as many as 60 or 65 people in a week when it's super busy. I do a lot of group therapy.
Terry North is a PTSD specialist with the Omaha VA.
I think when people come in, they are really anxious. They understand it's a trauma treatment clinic, and they think they may have to jump right into details of very painful experiences, and that's not how we operate. And I think that's really reassuring to people, and that part helps give them hope. They realize that they're going to get an opportunity to try to feel safe and connected.
When we come back, a member of Jesse Tolbert's squad opens up to me about his own struggles.
Plus, finding hope out of tragedy.
If you feel so inclined to get involved to support a veteran group, you know, a veteran service organization, there's over 40,000 of them. You know, you could find one.
When WOWT 6 News' Brian Mastre Reports returns.
Jesse Tolbert and Ian Morrison both served in the Army in Iraq. From what we can tell, they did not know each other. By all accounts, they were good at their jobs. Both killed themselves after they came home.
I can't pinpoint the reason.
Travis Johnson, Jesse's friend and fellow soldier, nearly followed the same path when he got back to Florida.
You can be doing fine for 364 days out of the year, and then there's this one day when it all comes down on you. I had a day like that the other day, like 2 days ago. It would have been so easy just to end it all. Like, I was so down. I was crying about everything. And I actually just like, in a field like right behind the shopping center that I worked at, just went on my knees in the grass and just looked up at the sky. I had had similar instances that weren't as powerful, that had led me to seek help, that had gave me the skills to realize what this day was and to get me through that day.
Whether the coping skills come from horses or hotlines, many veterans recognize the need to continue to be there for each other, even when they exit the military life.
When you enter the military, you know, they give you your kit or your equipment, and they give you your team. And with those two things, you're able to accomplish things that you never thought possible. And when you transition or exit the military, they take both of them away. The kit and the equipment in a very physical sense, you turn it in and it's like, hey, here it is back. And then you kind of, go off into, society, into the civilian population, and you don't have your team anymore.
As part of Team Red, White, and Blue, Brennan Mullaney connects veterans with community. There are more than 100 chapters in the country. He believes building relationships and participating can lead to a smoother, more organic transition to life as a civilian.
It's definitely a focus on the ordinary.
Mullaney, an Army veteran with 2 tours in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, met Rebecca Morrison at the Lincoln Memorial during Carry the Load, a fundraiser with the goal of restoring the true meaning of Memorial Day. They're now dating.
Listening to his stories helps me to better grasp what happened to Ian. And there's so many little coincidences. There's no doubt in my mind that he was placed in my life at a specific time.
For Rebecca Morrison, comfort and sadness sometimes go together.
Though this story is really tragic, my faith has been strengthened through it, and the faith of others too. And just even if you aren't a believer, your faith in humanity, that things can, they can work out. It's not, I don't like it, I'll never like it, but Ian's life has saved hundreds. His story has saved hundreds of people.
Jesse Tolbert's friends and family hope for the same thing.
The strongest and one of the most loyal people you'll probably ever meet. And that's should be what the standard for the Army should be.
Jesse Tolbert's squad back together again, remembering him for how he lived, not how he died. But it comes with a message from them to others who may be struggling. You're not alone. Thanks for watching. With photographer Jim Hinchek, I'm Brian Mastre reporting from Arlington National Cemetery.